Binding Operator weekly call. Today is June 30, 2022. We do have few topics for discussion. I think we can go ahead with David first. Andy, can we wait for the triage at the last?
Sure.
All right.
Although there isn't really anything to discuss here because there weren't any new issues filed.
Okay.
Yeah,
we
we'll
can
have a take a
annotate
look
that.
at the last. Yeah.
All right. So I
Okay.
wanted to discuss the what happened with the MongoDB community operator. There was a PR that closed that basically removed by use annotation on the CRD. And Baju, do you have time to check if there's any automation that's causing this, or it was a mistake by the developer?
I guess that could be a mistake because one possibility is that I had to confirm. See, many places where CRDs are generated from other sources, right? So, like a Go Pro, I mean, the file sender. So it may be removed by it like that because operator sticker does something like that. All these uh, annotations and all it generates. So we can check on that. Otherwise, if it was intentionally done, I don't see the PR is something unrelated. So
Doesn't
that
say anything about it. Yeah.
yeah.
It doesn't say anything about removing SBO annotations. It doesn't say, so it's. I think it's a mistake,
Yeah.
but
So
especially because notice other PRs that came before that one that
yeah.
touched that CRD and did not make any changes to that section, right?
Yeah. Right.
So it could be
So
that he had a rebase problem
yeah.
or something, right?
Yeah.
So
So I'll just confirm this theory and then I'll send a PR quickly with this same changes again, mentioning that this was accidentally removed in this
yeah,
PR.
and see what they respond. Maybe they come back and say, "Oh, but you need to change this automation or whatever," right? That's
Yeah.
fine.
Right.
Okay. All right. That's all I had on that. And then this is a learning experience. So I think having a separate object is gonna help with this, doing the same mapping.
Yeah, see,
And try to.
basically, just a general comment also. Once the MongoDB operator that we are talking about is the community operator, okay?
Right.
That is that one way to onboard into the MongoDB. But they have another operator which is the commercially used more. I think that is what the most of the customers everything is used. And this operator is like a trimmed down version of the other one, but it is separate implementation. So I think getting support for their main operator is much more important, in my opinion, than this community operator. Uh,
Yeah, but
yeah,
isn't this like a stepping stone? Like if the community accepts the changes, right?
yeah, yeah. But
Then
there is a
then you have
problem.
leverage.
Yeah, the other one, I don't think it is fully open source. It is not open source also. So, but it is there in our operator hub and all, like Red Hat internal operator hub. I think maybe it's because of supported by
Right.
and
So
yeah.
here's the idea that I'm cooking. This is mostly for SBO 2.0, right? It's not gonna be anytime soon, but hopefully we start getting attention into this. We can create the same mapping we put in the annotations for the CRD. We can create that mapping elsewhere with a resource, right? A custom resource, and then that mapping, and then we are aware of that type in our operator, and we're listening for, and then we already know by doing the mapping that such and such operator or such and such CRDs are bindable kinds, right? And then that way it's sort of like out of the box, right? So we don't have to be in the repository. This would allow us to implement non-open source CRDs, you know, in on our site. And then when we go into the out of the box mentality, right now I'm hesitant to do out of the box support for these services because a little change on their side will trigger a bug, right? And a bug for us to fix it is gonna be do a release. So every time then it's too high touch, right? But if we keep it out of the box, meaning yes, it's an object, we could as part of our releases, we can update those as well.
You
As we
mean
see,
out of the repository, not out of the box, right? In some other place. This configuration, what you're talking about.
this configuration will be in the cluster. We can bring some of them, but people can add to it. You know what I mean? People can
Yeah,
add,
you
an
want to
administrator can come
externalize.
in. Yes.
You're thinking you want to externalize this configuration data from our repository, our code base, into somewhere else.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And then we put it in some namespace, right? So as part of our installation, we can have the same ones that we have out of the box. We can translate it to this new object, and then we can even add more. Like if we want to add ACK, whatever we want to target for the next releases, we can put those objects there. But if something changes in the mapping, which is it's gonna happen, then we're gonna also get a bug, right? But we could, in the workaround, we could say, hey, workaround, change this object to such and such, and we make the change in our site, so the next release it'll pick it up, right? But and then as a workaround, we can say, hey, make these changes in this object in this namespace, and you should be fine, right? So and that keeps us a little bit more dynamic, and it could create a community around these objects, right? That are just mapping objects, and then people can start adding more mapping, and it's they can commit it to our repo, or they can create their own repo and community with that, right? But then SBO is the underpinning for all the stuff then, right? Because SBO understands that object and manages the life cycle. So,
Yeah, while we are on this topic, can I show you something that I had done sometimes back in something, this idea, similar idea? Is it okay? Can I share my screen and?
Yeah, sure.
yeah,
Go ahead.
yeah.
Okay, sure. 1 second. So my idea was to create a, okay, let me share my screen. Let me know if it is visible. Is it visible coming?
Yep.
Okay, so my idea is that to create a provision service, assemble provision service from multiple resources. Basically, it can be used as a external mapping. Okay. But thing is that instead of using annotation, I use a custom CRD. I call it as composite service. So basically, it's like a similar to the annotation, but in a different way. Okay, so there is a certain structure. One of the things that I allowed is to explicitly specify type and provider just for the convenience, and then user can mention n number of resources with their API ID, kind, name, like that. They can mention any number of secrets or config map, and then there are certain attributes like to specify a target path like this. And then there is also way to explicitly specify out of this above resources which are the fields that is interesting
You want to
or
project.
required to be like that. And then they also support a template in addition to that. This is like it's like a overlapping or cascading way. That's what I decided, like first resources, then the paths. On top of that there will be some Go template also. That way users can construct any complex URL or anything of that sort. That also become part of the final resource. So ultimately this is going to create a secret resource from all these various resources, and this presentation can be shared, right? So as long as you have this composite service CRD in your system, and this our repository, what I'm talking about would be a list of n number of composite services with different names. So it could be for MySQL or various resources, and this can be a externalized completely. And ultimately, if somebody want to use it, so it becomes like a provision service, because as you can see here, there is a status binding name which is going to point to a dynamically generated secret generated from this information like that. So
Okay, this is interesting. So this is similar idea, but it's a little bit different because you're combining the mapping with the service proxy, basically, right? So I think I want to separate those two things, because because the mapping, I wanted to make it like we do for the CRD, meaning I don't have to create an object for mapping many times. I can create the object for mapping once, right? And then that every time a new resource comes, we know how to do the mapping for that resource or resources. The idea of having multiple resources makes sense as well. But we only need this object once for all the instances of that type, right? Because the mapping is the same for all of them. So once the
Yeah.
resource comes in, then we can generate, and that, by the way, this is true not only for this type of map object, but also for annotations in the CRD. Once the object that we know the mapping for and is in bindable kinds comes on and we get the event, then we can create a proxy. That proxy is going to be a provision service that generates a secret right away. We don't have to wait for the service binding to generate the secret for that, right? We create this provision service, generate the secret with the mapping, have it ready in standby, and then it'll be a lot easier for a service admin that is managing all the services to say, okay, which one I want to reserve for the workloads, right? Do I want to reserve the one that has provision service supported by default, or do I want to support any of the proxies? This separation, I think, is going to allow us to, contain the mapping in a single object, then create the proxies with the service binding secret, and it'll allow us to separate the two controllers, the controllers that do what Red Hat wants to do with these mappings, which is via annotations and now this new object, and we can separate the controller that only looks at provision service then. Because we always gonna, from the Red Hat point of view, we will always have the mapping converted into provision service. That means that the controller that deals with the spec, it only needs to deal with provision services. It doesn't need to deal with these other extra things that SPO supports. So long term, that's the idea I'm cooking. I'm trying to put that in a document. But I think, it's basically that same object broken in two. I think. So think about that.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just thought of sharing this one also. Okay.
Okay. Good discussion, but hopefully, Andy, you think this is possible? Any opinion on this?
I think this looks very good. I think
Okay.
it's an interesting alternative to trying to drive this into like our upstream specification, trying to define like what service mapping would look like, keeping this external, and okay, maybe we have to run two operators now, one to support these combined services, and then one to actually perform service bindings.
Two controllers, I would say. Same
Two
operator.
controllers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Same operator.
Yeah.
Yep. I think that's the design. The same, and I think we already have two controllers. One to deal with bindable kinds. So basically, this controller that already deals with bindable kinds, we can repurpose it to also deal with the mappings. Because it's the same topic. Is how do we make the service? How do we make the service administrator discover these things easily, right? And at the same time, how do we create a community of supported services without having access to the source code of the service, only having access to the interface, which is the custom resource, right? So that's, I think, the key thing. And then that eventually that's going to drive adoption, because I could go back to the service now and say, you know what, if you use support provision services, we don't even need to do this mapping, right? So, but then from the workload point of view, it doesn't make a damn of a difference, right? So it's the same behavior from a workload.
It's just a secret that gets projected somewhere.
Yes.
Workload doesn't care.
Workload does not care. And with the label selector, even less. So they just care about a label. That's it. Yeah. All right. Cool.
All right.
Hopefully we'll get some from the participation from the workload side, that would be nice, right? So if we can start bringing people into this community from the workload side to support us with this, right? Because that's we'll be driving the workloads to be service binding ready with multiple services, and then once the workloads are in place, then we can go back to the service and say, hey, look how many workloads are using you via service binding, right? So
Okay. Uh, I
that's it.
think, yeah, we can go ahead with the next topic from
Hold on.
Baiju. Uh,
Um,
Baiju,
if I
yeah,
may,
yeah.
if I may make one last
Yeah, sure.
recommendation on that operator, could you submit that upstream and list it as something as as like one of the service providers to the website, Baiju?
Which one you're talking about?
The
Oh, the one that I
that
just showed.
yes.
Okay, that is private right now. I was working on some days back, but I kind of
Oh, okay, okay.
stopped working. But if there is interest, of course, I can make it a public project and show that one. Yeah.
I think there would be interest. I mean, if you don't feel it's ready to go show off publicly, then
Yeah, I
don't.
I haven't
Then
done
by
any
all means.
extensive testing. It's just like a proof of concept,
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, but there is nothing wrong to make it public again, and yeah, let me take a look again. Yeah.
Okay.
So
When
we could
okay.
use it as a base for whatever we do. So.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Okay. All right. I think Baiju, you're up next with
Yeah, I just
topic.
want to get where we are on this reference implementation and our implementation alignment, and what is going to be our next steps towards that. I just want to get the current
Well, I sort of
thinking
like
and
touched on it, right? A little bit. So if we have these two controllers, this is gonna be easy. The main concern I have is it gonna perform the same as ours? That's good because we do quite a bit of testing on our implementation. So it might be very well be that the reference implementation that's going out there that's focused on functionality. They don't really focus on product readiness, or production readiness, I should say.
okay.
So it might not be up to par, but that's where we can come in, right? We can say, hey, look, the functionality is there. It's not ready for us to use it, right? Because of this performance issues. How do we improve that? And then we come in, improve those. Once it's the same, similar performance, similar functionality, then it'll be easy to then switch it in a 2.0 and continue the work on the core implementation upstream in the reference implementation.
So that means our project is going to become like whatever core the reference implementation plus some additional.
For us, the additional controller that deals with these annotations, maybe, I mean, it's not going to be that easy because there's other things like environment variables. The way we support is a little bit different, right?
I could see us taking, CoreOS service bindings and then through a bit of translation magic, we rewrite them into becoming spec service bindings.
Yeah.
And doing all the necessary work to map all the things that CoreOS service binding does into whatever the spec kind of says we need to do for that.
Right. So that means that some of the functionality that we have today might go away, right?
That means we need to start doing some kind of deprecation warnings or something like that.
Exactly, something like. Well, let's pick what functionality is being used, what functionality is not being used. I guess, right? Core is definitely being used today, right? Anything we have in the other one is tech preview. In the spec one is tech preview, so that one could change however we want. I think the core one, what is the functionality in core besides the mapping used from CRDs and CRs and out of the box support? Besides that, what other functionality is there that is not in the spec, right? I think one of them is environment variables. We support mapping only to environment variables, for example, right? The spec doesn't mention that.
There
Um,
is a way, according to the spec, to project environment variables, but we can't do it off of, okay, I have a secret that has all my keys and all my values. I just want to project all that. No, we can't do that.
we cannot do that from the spec, right? But that's
No.
something that we support in core, basically. Right?
Yes.
So
Yes.
that's an example. What other functionalities there in core that that is not in the
Yeah.
defining the spec, right?
Okay,
Once we
this-
identify that, then we'll figure out, is this something that could be moved to the other controller, or if this is something that needs to be just a delta on top of whatever reference implementation comes in once we're happy with it, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
then
for
it might be that
certain
there's a
things-
little bit of delta, right? So,
Yeah, and for certain things, I think, like for example, this environment thing, we can even propose to spec itself to make it part of the spec if there
We
is
could.
a way to solve it,
we
right?
could, yeah.
So the alignment would be somehow thing we need to deprecate, somehow thing we need to see whether any way to bring that into the spec itself. Yeah.
Or some or a delta that we can put if it's a nice feature that a lot of customers are using, then we use it as a delta. In addition to the second controller, we have like a little delta, which it has more. I don't like that because then there's a little bit more work when we move versions, right? When we adopt new versions of the upstream implementation, then it'll be more work for us to bring it in, right? Because we need to have these deltas. So it could be a combination of upstream controller, plain vanilla spec, right? Plus a little bit of delta on that, plus a second controller dealing with the mappings, right? So I think that's what I'm thinking so far. But and that will be our 2.0 basically. That setup. I'm thinking we're still gonna be supporting CRDs annotation and CR annotation plus this extra mapping, but we're gonna drop the out-of-the-box support in favor of this extra object.
Yes.
But then
I imagine when we actually do this, we could have the annotation logic runs. It just takes everything, throws it in a secret, and then hands that secret off to the reference implementation via direct secret injection.
it could be there a secret injection, or it could be a proxy service with a little bit more info, because a secret by itself will not have information for the discovery of the workload side, right? I like the idea of having like a proxy service that has at least a reference to the original service resource, right? And then if someone wants to do some discovery, they can, right? So, and then it'll also have the service binding name pointing to the secret. So basically, it's a provision service, and then that's supported by the spec, right? So any controller we put in the spec, in the vanilla spec layer, that supports that, then we could use, and then that gives us flexibility in terms of what engine do I use, right? Do I use the engine that we built in-house, or do I use the engine that maybe the Japanese built and it's better now, right? So like that flexibility is gonna be good once we have it.
Okay. I think we are done with today's topics. I do not see any issues to be triaged. The latest issue which was opened into the our repo, I think that has already been responded to. That's what I see over here.
Keep in mind, right, it's not just about new issues, but also existing issues there. How we start
Yes.
cleaning up the backlog as well. Right? So we make
This-
sure that they respond back in time.
Yes, this will be fixed with the release of 1.1.1.
Yeah, I
Which
did
is-
see that. I actually was hoping, because I see like Crunchy for this. I think Baiju has already replied onto that. But do we need anyone to this is Red Hat? I mean, this team is Red Hat, or this is some other open source? I mean, outside of Red Hat?
This is the optional annotation one, right?
Yes.
Okay, this will be fixed. But it'll be fixed in the next minor release, right?
Will this be in 1.1, or are we gonna do 1.2?
No, this
No,
one is gonna
this
be
is
1.2. It'll be right.
no. This
Okay.
one do we have fixed? No, right? Our recommendation, what I mentioned, is to keep an annotation if they want to specify that.
You have like a workaround.
Yeah. I mentioned, last point. See, as a workaround, you can add the required annotation. That is.
So if they respond that the workaround is acceptable, do we still need to wait for your new feature to make it so that we can mark this done? Because I think there's 2 steps, right? The feature needs to be there, and then Crunchy out of the box needs to be changed, right?
No. That feature is no. That we are talking about a different issue. That my PR is not related to this thing,
Let me
right?
see.
That
I was
was
thinking that
different.
Crunchy one was the one with the annotation being optional. Is that a different one?
Yeah, that was a different
I
one. There
think
is
there is
another
Okay.
one more
Crunchy.
for Crunchy DB operator.
Oh, that's
And,
probably that one. Okay.
Yeah, and time check. I think we are
Yeah.
left with 1 minute.
We're ju-
I think this is the one you might be talking about.
No. My feature, I
Not
don't
even.
know
No,
whether it
this-
was
this-
not. No, I think it was something else.
Yeah,
There was another-
this issue is the one that's driving projected permissions.
Yes, which is another is scheduled for the spring, by the way.
Okay.
So maybe we should put a comment there that we
Yes.
are working on it.
Yes, I think that would be probably a good idea.
So I think I assigned that to Baiju. So Baiju, take a look at the Jira. That is
Yeah,
pointing to
you
this.
asked. Yeah, there is an issue that you. Okay, I missed yesterday, but I saw that task. Yeah, that one, right? You're referring to that. Okay.
I think we are done with the time.
Who's gonna be the next triage person when Andy goes? Do we
I
figure
can-
that out?
I can do that.
Okay. Thank you, Baiju.
All right. All right then. Thanks everyone.
Okay, bye.
Thank you.
Take care.